Right, so the one thing that I remember seeing the most when I started making videos for Fighter 101 was probably the large number of people that would show up and make comments in regards to how old the game is. People would come up and say, or type, things like, why would you be making combo videos for a game that is so damn old? Or, awesome video, too bad you were over 15 years late. As the list goes on and on, but the point is that the average modern gamer looks at Street Fighter, Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, and sees a very old and outdated game that is full of horrible glitches. For many of us who grew up in the late 70s and early or mid 80s, this is a game that defined our gaming experience. It showed us that a game could be ageless. I could still sit down and play for hours, Street Fighter, just play against someone who has a decent level of skill, and just play for hours. It's that good. I could play some of my favorite NES and Super Nintendo games for a while, but the only game that I can play frequently and not get tired of is Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. I think a lot of the new games out there are really good, but there's just something about the games that you played when you were younger that is really special and different. I still remember the local arcade that we had near my place. They had pretty much every game that we grew up playing back then. They had Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, they had Mortal Kombat, Samurai Shodown, Art of Fighting 2, Fatal Fury, and a bunch of other fighting games that I really didn't play that much. Like Fighter's History and World Heroes. But it was the Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo matches that people would gather around and just look at the guys that were like really good and try to be as good as them. I also remember there was this altered version of the game that Ryu and Ken would do dragon punches and a bunch of fireballs would come out. And that game was broken, crazy, glitchy, but it was part of the arcade experience back then too. It was pretty obvious to me that Street Fighter was the game of all games. I remember that whenever I bought a new console, I would immediately think about buying the best version of Street Fighter that I could find on that console. So when I bought a Super Nintendo, I would go out and get Street Fighter, then Street Fighter 2 Turbo, and eventually Super Street Fighter, the new Challengers. The thing is that I would never be able to have all three of them at once, because I remember my parents wouldn't buy that many games for me because I had bad grades. So I would always have to go downtown to a shop to trade games in order to get the latest ones. So usually I'd have to trade 2 games just to get a new one. So I traded my original Street Fighter, I remember, and my Street Fighter Turbo just to get the new Challengers. But it was definitely worth it. So it was fun just going downtown and looking for someone that would trade games with you. And then I did the same thing when I bought a Sega Genesis, which I found to be one of my favorite consoles back then. Now that I think of it, that was really the worst version I ever played. All the characters sounded like they had a really bad cold. It was really bad. Terrible. I do want to make an honorable mention for the Champion Edition on the Genesis because of that awesome kick-ass cover that it had. That was pretty much the coolest looking cover for any Street Fighter game ever made. Then I remember I got the 3DO version, and I thought that was the closest to the arcade experience, at that point at least. Now I know it's far from an accurate port, but the thing is that back then it looked way better than any other of the console games that were out there. Then I got the version for the Dreamcast and the PS2, and then even the PS3 when the HD remix came out, of course. But the point is that the only game that I ever wanted to buy and play on any console that I ever owned that I remember of was Street Fighter. I remember I even bought that stupid little Tiger handheld game for Street Fighter to make this cool, which was obviously horrible. It was just the fact that it was Street Fighter that I would want to buy it and own it. There's something hypnotic and extremely rewarding about playing this game against someone else, and even playing the arcade mode. It's just a really, really good game. It's basically a competitive expression that some people pretend it's not about competing, but it's definitely 100% about competing. The joy that I get out of the game is part of the whole experience that could very well have a lot to do with the part of my brain that likes to revisit my youth. I've come to realize that the Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo experience is so addictive because it combines 3 things that I enjoy. The first thing is video games in general. I like video games because they are my generation's escape from boredom and from dullness. the dullness of daily activities is probably one of the reasons why most people like video games. The second reason is the competitive aspect of it. I'm a very competitive person, and ever since I was very young, I was always setting goals and making sure that I would do everything in my power to accomplish them. So I think that Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo is one of those games that makes it extremely easy for you to get instant competitive gratification, and that makes it very appealing. The last reason is probably the most important, because it merges the two other things that make me love Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, and that creates the ultimate experience, which basically that last thing is the nostalgia that you feel when you play this game. I figured out that I don't love Street Fighter 2 because of the graphics or the way that the game sounds or the gameplay or the mechanics. I actually love Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo because of a combination of every single one of those things, and that feeling that it gives you while you play it. It's a slight feeling of melancholy and about the good old days, and basically Street Fighter is like an anthem of a gaming generation. So it's just so many things that you feel when you play this game that it goes beyond just what the game is about, that makes it so special. Those are the feelings that none of the new games that could ever trigger for me, because I was exposed to those new games as an adult, a jaded and cynical adult. It's I can enjoy those new games, but I only get like 2 out of those 3 elements that I get from Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, and that's the reason why that game is special above the rest, because it does have those 3 elements that you can't really get from that many other games. Every time you hear a stage tune from the game, or you hear Guile say Sonic Boom, or Ryu say Hadouken, you're immediately taken back to your youth, back to a time when everything felt new and you actually felt excited about things. I can't remember the last time I felt hyped up and excited about anything, but back then things felt different in a great way. Alright guys, that was it for this first video. I hope it triggered some great memories from your childhood, and that it makes you want to pick up Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo on any console or emulator and play right now. And also be sure to check out ST Revival, Arcadium, and the No Honor Crew on Facebook for more information on anything related to Super Street Fighter Turbo and Street Fighter in general. And also stay tuned for more videos coming soon. Thank you.